Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome aboard. Today's video is on the subject of Linux, more specifically the i3 window manager and a few tweaks that I've been doing, which will come out very soon in an update to Skywave Linux, a similar update to Mofo Linux, and finally to Catbird Linux. All of them are going to get this update. It is really slick. I'm so enthusiastic to show it to you today. First, let me bring up some notes. So we'll use Look at Me as the slideshow application. We're going to talk about i3, which is the cat's meow. Why do I like i3 so much? It's lightweight, leaves more CPU and RAM for your resource-hungry applications. It's keyboard-driven. It can be very, very fast when you develop some muscle memory and can start really flying over the keyboard doing various tasks. It can be made better with some scripts written by Bud Rich. Bud Rich on GitHub. On YouTube, he's got a channel called Bud Labs. So look for him here, watch the videos that he's made on i3, and there's one on i3zen, which he put out fairly recently, which are quite pertinent to what we're going to do here today. i3s sounds a bit crude, but what it really means is i3 assistance scripts. They tweak the behavior of i3 for a better and smoother way to manage containers, windows, to tweak the focusing rules a bit. And if you use scripts like i3wm, for example, you can set up some very nice window arrangements on the screens. It's a really neat set of scripts. I use them in a more simple way on this system, mostly to manage the focusing rules and somewhat to tweak the behavior of floating windows. All right, so my Linuxes, I use 3 of them. They're all Ubuntu based. Essentially, I take Ubuntu and strip everything out of it and rebuild it. Mofo Linux is probably the oldest of them all. A lot of people use it. Its purpose is to unblock the internet and provide some anonymity anywhere on the goddamn planet, except where they pull the plug and where there is no internet. It works really well. I use it. I started using it when I was in this place, which uses these metric altitudes to fly. Look it up on the map or in your aviation books. Find out which countries use 8,400 meters defined as flight level 276. This is a 9-year-old photograph, and we're smoking along at 300 knots indicated. And the internet was restricted over there, drove me up a wall. I started building Linux systems to evade the goddamn censorship, and it worked, and I continue to build it and distribute that around the world. And a lot of people are using it. Skywave Linux is another popular one of my systems. It uses several applications made for software-defined radio and internet streaming. I essentially went around on the internet, GitHub, and elsewhere, found some really neat apps and put them all together on the Linux system, tweaked them and configured them so that if you want to use some pretty slick software-defined radios and internet streaming for them, just download the distro, run it as a live environment, and you're on your way. Catbird Linux, I use it as a daily driver. It's good for data analysis, editing code, and various tasks. I do a lot of testing and tweaking on this one, and when I find things that work well, then I add those to Skywave and Mofo and then put out updates. And again, they're all based on Ubuntu with i3, using custom keybinds to bring up the various apps. i3wm is for managing the containers and windows. And I've tweaked the floating window behavior slightly. I did not find myself too satisfied with the natural default behavior in i3 for the floating windows. But you can make i3 do anything you want with the help of an i3 IPC listener, interprocess communication listener. Those have been now written in Go, in Python, in Rust. I even saw an IPC listener written in Bash. So you use one of those to monitor what i3 is doing, and it can modify or allow you to send commands that have been modified so that these windows appear properly centered and sized the way you want it. Everything's a bit less haphazard, and it cleans out the bullshit until the devs decide to implement better operation in their code. I mean, I don't want to bust their balls all the time. They do a good job, but the floating windows is a bit of a pet peeve I've had. So normal floating windows in i3, not using i3zen, the way it works on this system is I have a keybind to toggle the floating behavior on and off. The keybind is Shift Super Space. The active window will pop out of the tiles and float, as you can see here. And using Super Shift Space again, the active window will stop floating and will drop back down and fit among the other open windows in a workspace. With i3zen, the behavior is a bit different. I have set up a keybind on this system, Control Super Space. Using that, the active window will pop out of the tiles and it will move to the first empty workspace, and it will reside in a tabbed container. So it will look like a regular floating window when it's by itself. When you open another application, the other applications will set up as tabs within that container. If you hit Control Super Space again, the active window will go back to the tiles in the original workspace. If you have other newer tabs in that container, well, those will stay. They will stay in the new container. If you hit Shift Super Space, remember the old float toggling command? If you do that, they'll separate and will float in that workspace, and you can unfloat them by hitting Shift Super Space again. It's pretty slick. Here's a bit of the code that I have extracted from my i3 config file. These are the parts that really matter. So to shorten things a bit, I use variables for some of the commands. First off, I like to use the super key, also known as the Windows key on some keyboards. So mod is set to mod 4, which is the super key. And instead of typing bindsim mod 4 all over the doggone config file, I define super as bindsim mod 4. So then we set up the way we start i3zen. The script is called with, or we defined zen as exec no startup ID exec i3zen, and to toggle conventional style in i3 super shift space to start i3zen super control space. So you see the difference. Shift super space for conventional floating and unfloating, super control space for i3zen. If you want to see a complete config file, you can look on my GitHub and you can download it, play around with it, use it yourself. Because this system has different applications set up than what you would have on your system, you would certainly want to go through it and change things around so that your video, audio player, web browser, and all of those are being properly called with the shortcuts in there. Let's talk about a few examples. Regular i3 we'll open a GUI file manager and a command line file manager. This is going to be Kaja and LF, and then a new terminal, and we'll play with the new terminal float and unfloated. I've actually got some of it set up already. Here's the GUI file manager, Kaja. Here's the command line interface file manager, LF. And here's just a simple terminal. I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on there to make it more recognizable. So to float and unfloat it the conventional way, there's Shift Super Space. Okay. Now i3zen is different. Control Super Space. And we have moved from these workspaces. Remember, we were over here, and now that terminal is gone. It's been moved over here to workspace 11. So it goes past the last one in use. So that's 11. I'm using 10 for the screen recorder, which I'm not going to bring up here. But there it is. Remember the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I had typed in earlier. There it is again. Now, if I open some more applications, maybe another terminal, or perhaps the web browser, there's Firefox. These are all tabbed in here. All right. I can close them. And, oops, wrong letter. And the tabs simply go away. Let's bring up Firefox again. So we've got these in a container, tabbed. If I want to split Firefox off, Shift Super Space separates it. Shift Super Space. Now it's set in regular tiling mode. It's not floating anymore. All right, so I'll close that one. Let's try something else. Let's do it again, actually. So I brought it up again. Let's try Let's try Control Super Space. This is going to i3. This is going to i3zen this thing. So I did that. What happened? Split the two. Close Firefox. Guess what? Hit Control Super Space again, and it goes back to the original workspace, the original container. Hey, let's i3zen this one here, LF. Control, Shift, Space. That's the i3zen command. And we have again moved to the first open workspace above whatever I had in these other ones. And let's see, let's do something else. There's VLC, all right? It's in a tab. Control Super Space to i3zen that mofo, and it goes right back to where it was. Well, not completely. It was up here before, but it's gone down here. It took first available spot. It took the first available spot. So it's pretty cool. Let's go back out with this again. So notice that I've rejoined VLC Media Player here. Now what happens if I make VLC the active window and I toggle the i3zen command? Well, there it is. You just saw it. It simply splits these two. Do it again. This window goes back to its original place. And we still have VLC just out here floating by itself. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So with regular i3, open some windows. You can toggle in and out of floating mode, no problem. With i3zen, if you have a bunch of windows open in a workspace like that, you can use the i3zen keys and it'll pop out and go to the first unused workspace above the workspaces which you have already started using. And just to give an example, what the hell? Let's go to the video screen recorder. Let's just move it. Let's put that down in, let's put it in 2. Why not? So now we've got a whole bunch of stuff all together here. We've got the slideshow. We've got the OBS, the recording things here. It's a complete mess, right? So there's workspace 1, workspace 2. We've got LF. Let's apply some i3zen to this LF window. And there it is. It finds the highest numbered workspace in use, adds 1 to it, number 3. So there it is. That's how i3zen picks where it's going to send that application. It's nice because sometimes you just want to have a floating window without a whole bunch of clutter behind it. That's one of the advantages. You know, let's come over here and just use conventional floating. If I just use conventional floating windows, yes, I've got this one, but take a look what's under it. There's this, which may be distracting depending on what you're doing. And if you're not careful with your mouse, you might click on something out here when you really want to stay in there, and you might do something on a window that you might not want to modify. So, pretty slick. All right, there was something else that I wanted to discuss. Let's i3zen this one and move it. Let's move it over to workspace 3. So we talked about what happens when you toggle things out of the tiling arrangement, where they go, how to get them back. Splitting the tabs, you can unfloat the old way. That means using, in my case, toggle the floating with shift super space. We can split them either the old way or with i3zen, and the behavior is different. The old way simply unfloats things. If you use i3zen, you may well send something back to the original workspace. So the behavior depends on what you're using. Conclusion, it works like a charm. It absolutely does. Thank you for watching. This is the Mach 7 Radio Intercepts channel. Man, I love that wallpaper. Yeah, you know what else is pretty slick wallpaper? This guy here, considering events in our homeland, yeah, this one's pretty appropriate whenever I want to trigger my right-leaning friends and non-friends at the library, coffee shop. If I'm visiting someone, I'm not really welcome in any of their homes anymore, but if I know any Trumpists, I usually start with that one. The Neo-Confederates sure love that one. Get a few looks in the coffee shop with that. And then, man, there's morbid stuff like this, which I sent to a couple of pilots that I used to work with. Yeah, they don't call anymore either. They've grown rather tired of it, but I'm totally serious. I'm absolutely serious, and we are going to see some exciting times soon Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, 3%ers, Patriot Front, QAnoners, and Trumpists. Where you go one, you go all. Look at those bones. Not one of them died from natural causes. So fuck the Trumpists. And with that, have a beautiful day. We'll see you again on the Mach 7 Radio Intercepts channel.